In One Piece, beneath the waves of grand adventure, lies something far more personal. Behind its fantastical world are deeply human struggles that drive motivation, forge identity, and even cultivate self-destructive behaviors. By diving into the motivational psychology of Nami, we can unravel how her fierce independence, once a shield for survival, becomes the greatest obstacle to saving her own village. Let's uncover the psychology of what makes One Piece the greatest story of all time. Nami's foundational need for safety and security is partially filled after she is rescued from a war zone as an infant from Bellemere, a former Marine. Raised in Kokoyashi Village, alongside her adoptive sister Nojiko, Nami grows up in poverty, but within a loving and emotionally supportive household. Although Bellemere provides consistent care, emotional warmth, and moral structure, allowing Nami to feel emotionally protected, Nami remains acutely aware of their poverty and continues to feel that their financial security is under constant threat. This fragile sense of security is shattered when the pirate Arlong arrives in Kokoyashi Village and imposes a violent extortion system, demanding tribute payments for each resident. Bellemere only has enough money to pay for either herself or her two daughters, but refuses to deny their existence. In an act of brutal enforcement, Arlong kills Bellemere in front of Nami. Bellemere's death eliminates the only source of protection and emotional stability in Nami's life, leaving her without any structure. This traumatic event also plunges the entire village into financial bondage. The incident marks a total collapse of Nami's safety, both in the loss of physical and financial protection and in the destabilization of her environment. Nami internalizes the event as proof that poverty and powerlessness lead to death, and that emotional attachment can come at a devastating cost. In response, she becomes hypervigilant, emotionally closed off, and focused on survival. She develops a belief that money is the only reliable means of securing safety for herself and those she loves. This mindset drives her to work for Arlong, who made a false promise to Nami that for 100 million berries, she could buy back her village's freedom. Before joining the Straw Hats, Nami exhibited neurotic traits rooted in deep distrust, emotional isolation, and a distorted view of her circumstances. Having been exploited by Arlong from a young age, she refused to rely on anyone, believing that trust would inevitably lead to harm. Her intense fixation on money became a defining trait, reflecting a belief that control over wealth could somehow secure her freedom and protect her village. Most notably, she clung to the distorted belief that Arlong would honor their agreement, despite knowing full well he was not trustworthy. This false sense of control allowed her to suppress the helplessness and fear caused by her unmet needs for safety and security, even as it kept her emotionally closed off and alone. Despite the coercive nature of the pact between Arlong and Nami, Arlong creates a social environment that appears to support intrinsic motivation by providing Nami with perceived autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Arlong allows Nami to leave the village and earn money through any means she chooses, creating the illusion that she is acting out of her own volition. This perceived autonomy gives her a sense of agency. She is not micromanaged, and the goal of freeing her village appears achievable on her terms. Arlong acknowledges Nami's skill as a cartographer and navigator, relying on her expertise to expand his territory. She hones her craft in navigation and mapping, and her growing mastery reinforces a sense of competence, a belief that she can effectively navigate and influence the world. Despite being forced into Arlong's crew, Nami maintains strong emotional ties to the villagers of Kokoyashi and secretly protects them. She also shows concern for the Straw Hats, saving Zoro from drowning, and even pretending to kill Usopp to protect him. These enduring relationships sustain her relatedness, a sense of connection to others that give her actions emotional and moral meaning. When autonomy, competence, and relatedness are at least superficially supported, individuals can internalize external regulators, transforming them into more intrinsic forms of motivation. In Nami's case, her behavior to trust and follow Arlong takes root in her psyche and is eventually internalized to more intrinsically motivated behavior. The villagers' financial and physical safety serves as an external regulator for Nami's actions. She collaborates with Arlong, supplying maps and money to preserve peace within Kokoyashi village. Nami feels intense guilt because the villagers suffer whenever they try to protect her from Arlong's plans. This guilt burdens her with the responsibility of keeping them safe by complying with Arlong's demands, even though it means sacrificing her own freedom. Nami begins to endorse the values of her actions, even though those actions are externally motivated. She justifies stealing from pirates, deception, and even aligning with criminal networks, because they serve a deeply valued goal, freeing her village. Nami accepts her behavior as necessary and morally justified in service of her cause. Nami eventually internalizes the identity of being a part of Arlong's crew. She shows off his tattoo, performs her duties, and is seen as one of his subordinates. Her behavior becomes less motivated by Arlong's direct orders and more from who she is as a person. For instance, she steals a Going Merry and goes back to Arlong's crew. This was spurred by her seeing Arlong's bounty poster in the Baratier. However, this was not an action directed by Arlong, but purely on her own volition to stick with her mission. The turning point in Arlong Park occurs when Arlong shatters the illusion that sustained Nami's internalized motivation. Each of her psychological needs, once seemingly supported, is revealed to have been manipulated or fabricated. Arlong never intended to honor the pact. When Nami is on the cusp of collecting 100 million berries, Arlong simply bribes the Marines to seize it, rendering her efforts meaningless. Her belief that she was freely choosing her path is destroyed. She realizes she was never truly in control. With the theft of her earnings and the unraveling of her plans, Nami's sense of competence collapses. Her carefully acquired skills and calculated decisions did not affect the system. She is rendered powerless in the face of a rigged environment, unable to change her circumstances through effort or expertise. The villagers, whom she had tried so desperately to protect, choose to fight Arlong on their own. The social bonds that motivated her are threatened. Even after Arlong reveals his true colors, proving beyond doubt that he's not someone who can be trusted, Nami still clings to the deal. She desperately tries to reassure the villagers that she can collect 100 million berries and make it work, despite overwhelming evidence that Arlong will never honor his promise. This persistence is striking. She's no longer responding to any real external regulator, yet her behavior continues. The fact that she remains motivated to follow through on the deal, even after its collapse, shows just how deeply that external goal has been internalized. Even after Nami's plea, the villagers decide to continue their fight toward Arlong. With no external regulator, and nothing to pseudo-satisfy her need for safety and security, Nami enters a state of amotivation, specifically helplessness beliefs, reflecting a perception that her efforts are futile given the magnitude of the task. This is captured in the iconic moment when Nami stabs her shoulder, tearing through the tattoo Arlong forced upon her. This act is both literal and symbolic, a rejection of her identity, an expression of despair, and a surrender to helplessness. One core aspect of Nami's character during the Arlong Park arc is her reluctance or even inability to ask for help. She specifically takes this burden on by herself. However, Nami is forced to face a devastating truth that the strategy she had poured her identity and hope into, her deal with Arlong, was doomed from the start, because it was born from the very system that had exploited, manipulated, and imprisoned her. What follows is a turning point in her emotional development. Nami asks for help. For the first time, she abandons her rigid self-reliance and turns to another. Her tearful plea, "Luffy, help," is a moment of vulnerability, marking the abandonment of the transactional coping strategy that pseudo-satisfied her safety and security needs, and the beginning of becoming her authentic self. Rather than viewing dependence as weakness, Nami recognizes the strength and connection and the legitimacy of her emotional needs. This shift also realigns her motivations. Following Arlong's defeat, Nami continues to pursue her goal of mapping the world, but now it is no longer motivated by economic survival or self-protection. Instead, her dream is pursued within the secure base of the Straw Hat crew, where emotional support and mutual trust replace her previous reliance on control and isolation. The abandonment of a coping mechanism rooted in self-reliance in favor of vulnerability and support marks a critical juncture in her development, as this pushes her towards self-actualization, becoming a cartographer and making a map of the entire world. In One Piece, beneath the waves of grand adventure lies something far more personal. Behind its fantastical world are deeply human struggles that drive motivation, forge identity, and even cultivate self-destructive behaviors. By diving into the motivational psychology of Usopp, we can unravel how the quiet scars of his childhood, the absence of his father, and the loss of his mother seep into the way he speaks, connects, and clings to others, forming bonds built on the fear of abandonment. Until next time, keep sailing the seas of self-discovery, one chapter at a time.